Welcome back to ZNGP Today. Former rider and DAZN commentator Dani Pedrosa has raised doubts about Marc Márquez's ability to complete the remaining races of MotoGP's Asian swing after the Ducati star fractured his right shoulder in the Mandalika crash. Pedrosa, who analyzed the incident live, warned the injury mechanism and runoff configuration could make a quick return unlikely, suggesting Marquez may miss the upcoming Australia and Malaysia rounds. Jorge Martín continues rehabilitation after surgery on a displaced right clavicle fracture sustained in the Motegi sprint crash. Although the operation in Barcelona under Dr. Xavier Mir was declared a success, both Aprilia and the rider are prioritizing a cautious, medically guided recovery, while Martín himself has made clear he wants to return to racing at the earliest safe opportunity. Hodgson has offered a detailed breakdown of the Turn 7 collision that ended the Indonesian Grand Prix weekend for Motegi and Marc Márquez. From the footage Hodgson reviewed, the incident looks like a tragic chain reaction of momentum, a panicked correction and unfortunate contact, not an intentional move, but it left Márquez with a right shoulder fracture and both riders shaken. Ducati has confirmed Marc Márquez will miss the next two Grands Prix after sustaining a shoulder injury in a Lap 1 collision with Motegi at the Indonesian GP. Medical scans in Madrid revealed a fracture at the base of the coracoid process and a shoulder ligament injury. Team doctors have advised conservative treatment, meaning no surgery and a recovery program of rest and rehabilitation. Márquez is expected to be sidelined until at least November's Portuguese GP. Don't forget to click subscribe button and the bell icon for MotoGP news update. Pedrosa described the crash sequence and the forces that likely damaged Márquez's shoulder, explaining why the injury could be serious even before scans. He pointed to the high entry speed into gravel and the abrupt extension of the joint as the probable cause. He said Márquez left behind his shoulder while entering the gravel at speed, which produced a maximum extension and the injury. A shoulder injured in that way can involve complex damage, fractures, dislocations or soft tissue tears, all of which affect recovery time differently. Pedrosa criticized the Mandalika runoff design, asphalt followed by gravel with an abrupt step, calling for runoffs to sit slightly lower than track level so riders enter a small gravel pool, rather than hitting a step at speed. He drew on personal experience to underline the risk. If the gravel isn't a bit lower than the asphalt, hitting that step at speed can hurt you more. With 2 flyaway rounds left in the Asian Tour, Pedrosa was cautious about Márquez's chances of lining up in Australia and Malaysia. He said the full extent of the damage will be clear only after imaging, but suggested those events may come too soon for a return. We'll have to wait for the results tomorrow or the day after, but I don't know if Marc will be able to be present at the next 2 races. Conservative prognoses are common after shoulder fractures. Even operable breaks often require weeks of rehab before race fitness is possible. Pedrosa praised Fermin Aldeguer's victory and Pedro Acosta's strong weekend, noting that while Ducati suffered a tough day, several young riders seized the opportunity. He singled out Aldeguer for consistent pace and Acosta for his second-half season form. Aldeguer saved the day for the brand, and Acosta has been remarkably consistent since the summer. The Mandalika result reshuffles momentum for teams and riders, even as the factory contends with injury and uncertainty. Márquez's potential absence would complicate Ducati's end-of-season plans and shift dynamics among title contenders and manufacturers. Pedrosa's cautionary note about recovery time signals a likely rethink of rider workloads and contingency plans for the next events. Teams now must balance rehabilitation timelines with strategic choices for remaining rounds. Wildcard swaps, test allocations and short-term setup changes all become part of damage control. Dani Pedrosa's frank analysis frames Mandalika as both a medical and a safety story. The immediate priority is clarity on Marc Márquez's shoulder damage, but the incident also revives questions about runoff design and rider protection. If Pedrosa's doubts prove prescient, the next weeks will be about measured recovery, contingency planning from Ducati, and whether the younger generation who's shown in Indonesia can carry the championship's spectacle forward while the paddock waits for clarity on Marquez's return. Martín suffered a displaced, multi-fragment clavicle fracture in the Motegi incident that also involved teammate Marco Bezzecchi. He was flown to Spain for specialist surgery. The medical director confirmed the procedure was complex because the fracture had 3 fragments. Surgeons fixed the break with screws and a support plate in the middle distal third. Complex clavicle repairs with internal fixation are common when bones are displaced. They allow earlier mobilization but still require structured rehab. Martín is determined but realistic. Rehabilitation will start immediately and follow medical guidance rather than emotional timelines. Recovery times are still unknown. We can't give an exact return date, but rehabilitation will begin as soon as possible. Early physio focuses on pain control, range of motion and shoulder stability before progressive strength and on-bike conditioning. Aprilia confirmed Martín will miss the Australian GP at Phillip Island in 2 weeks. The team emphasized the need to follow doctors' protocols rather than rush him back. Although keen to return quickly, he accepts the team will prioritize medical advice and long-term health. Missing Phillip Island is sensible. High-speed tracks demand full shoulder function for braking and impacts. While nothing is set in stone, both rider and team are eyeing the final doubleheader, Portugal and Valencia, as possible return points if rehabilitation progresses well. The plan will be reassessed week by week, balancing recovery benchmarks and fitness work. A late-season comeback is feasible after plated clavicle repairs, but it depends on pain, motion, strength and clearance from medical staff. Martín's persistence, a hallmark of his career, is matched by a pragmatic acceptance of medical reality. Aprilia has stressed player welfare and a measured timeline, while teammates and staff have rallied in support. Long-term performance depends on returning fully fit. Short-term heroics risk re-injury. Jorge Martín's operation was successful and he wants to get back on the bike as soon as possible, but Aprilia and the medical team insist on a staged, evidence-led recovery. Phillip Island is already ruled out. Portimao and Valencia remain realistic targets only if rehabilitation hits the necessary milestones. For now, the priority is clear: full recovery first, competitive return second. Hodgson points to the sequence from turn 6 into turn 7 as the decisive window. Bezzecchi, having lost a few places at the start, carried strong momentum and in the transition he squared the line and slid. That slide led to a sudden lift and a forward jumping of the bike. From the aerial view, you can see that it's not that Marc is slow. It's that, basically, Marco Bezzecchi is fast. The mechanics of a high-speed slide can unexpectedly change the bike's attitude. A lifted rear can place a following rider in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hodgson argued Bezzecchi didn't intend an overtake. Instead, the combination of sliding traction and a late correction put him into Marc's line. He rounded the corner, realized his compromised position, closed the throttle and, crucially, his bike's forward momentum contacted Marquez's rear. He described Bezzecchi's late lift and correction as a panicked reaction that resulted in unintentional contact. In tight mid-pack moments, minute changes in throttle or line can have outsized consequences. The footage appears to show little time to recover. Both men reacted immediately. Bezzecchi apologized to Marquez at the scene and Aprilia issued a formal apology. Hodgson stressed that the crash looked accidental rather than malicious. On-track remorse and a team apology don't erase the outcome, but they matter. They framed the incident as a racing error and not deliberate aggression. Marquez suffered a fracture to his right shoulder and ligament damage. Bezzecchi escaped more superficial injury but was visibly bruised. The medical scans confirmed the shoulder break that required surgery and will dictate Marquez's short-term availability. Shoulder fractures at race speeds are serious. Recovery and rehab will now be the priority, beyond the incident's sporting consequences. While many commentators viewed the clash as unintentional, stewards are expected to review the footage. Aprilia warned that Bezzecchi could face a sanction ahead of the Australian Grand Prix. Hodgson's take, that it was a misjudgment born of momentum and panic, may influence public perception but not the regulatory outcome. Race control will weigh intent, lines and avoidable risk. Even accidental errors can attract penalties if the action endangered others. Neil Hodgson's slow-motion read of the video frames turns a headline collision into a human story of speed, split-second judgment, and consequence. The evidence points to an unintentional, momentum-driven contact rather than malice, yet the result is severe, a sidelined Marquez and a likely stewarding process for Bezzecchi. In MotoGP, nuance matters. The video can show what happened, but the wider effects, medical, sporting and emotional, will be felt long after the images fade. Marquez returned to Spain for further tests after the Mandalika incident. Examinations at the Ruba Internacional Hospital detected a coracoid base fracture and associated ligament damage to his right shoulder, but no significant bone displacement or aggravation of previous arm injuries. The medical team recommended conservative care rather than an operation. Doctors Samuel Antuna and Ignacio Roger de Ona advised immobilization and rehab instead of surgery. The decision minimizes surgical risk and prioritizes full-strength recovery, but it automatically rules Marquez out of the immediate flyaway rounds. Ducati has announced Marquez will skip the Australian and Malaysian Grands Prix to follow the prescribed recovery timeline. The team will focus on ensuring he returns fully fit rather than rushing him back. My goal is to be back before the end of the season, but without rushing things beyond the doctor's recommendations. Missing 2 flyaways gives the medical staff a few weeks of controlled rehabilitation, yet it also reshuffles Ducati's short-term planning on track and on logistics. Avoiding surgery reduces immediate medical risk and preserves future options, but healing time for shoulder fractures and ligament injuries can still be lengthy and unpredictable. Conservative care demands disciplined rehab and careful load management before resuming race intensity. The team's cautious approach reflects Marquez's history, and an awareness that past arm trauma changed how they manage his recoveries. Ducati has not named a replacement rider. Test rider Michel Pirot is a likely candidate, though current concession rules limit wildcard options. In the short term, Ducati must decide whether to field a stand-in, stick with the remaining lineup, or call on test personnel depending on travel logistics and championship priorities. With the constructors' and riders' situations evolving, Ducati must balance immediate points scoring with long-term rider welfare. Marquez described the incident as a racing collision and appealed for calm among fans after social media backlash towards Bezzecchi. He emphasized patience and the priority of a full recovery. The paddock reaction mixes sympathy for the injured champion with procedural questions that the stewards will later address. He called for no hard feelings toward Marco and underscored the need to follow medical advice. The tone from Ducati and Marquez is pragmatic. Celebrate the season's success, then focus on repair and return. Marc Márquez's enforced absence reshuffles the final phase of the season. Ducati must manage points and development, while their champion rehabs, and rivals get a brief window to press. The team's non-surgical route aims to protect Marquez's long-term form rather than force a quick comeback. The immediate questions now are who fills his race seat and how Ducati sustains momentum until his projected return. Thanks for watching ZNGP Today, and this is your MotoGP news update. And see you next time!